Hello, friends. If you're curious about the movie Terminator Genisys, 2015, you're in the perfect place. Don't forget to give this video a quick like, it really helps us out. And if you're new here, hit subscribe to stay updated on all the latest movie deep dives. Let's jump right in. It begins in the ruins of a world scorched by judgment, where the skies are leaden with ash and the ground is littered with the memories of a time before everything shattered. Humanity fights not just for survival, but to reclaim its place in a world ruled by cold, merciless steel. In this fractured future, where the scent of burnt ozone lingers in the air and every footstep could awaken death in metal form, one name echoes across the shattered cities: John Connor, the last hope, the leader of the resistance. But hope in this story is as fragile as glass, and time is about to twist in ways no one can predict. In the closing days of the war between man and machine, the resistance mounts one final, desperate push against Skynet's defenses. The machines are cornered, glitching, crumbling. But with one last move, the artificial intelligence reveals its contingency plan: a time machine buried deep within its core. A weapon not of destruction, but of manipulation, one designed to unravel fate itself. A lone sentinel, a soldier forged in loss and loyalty, is chosen to follow the thread of time backward. His mission: to protect a woman who has never seen the war but holds within her the future of everything. Her name is Sarah, and to him, she is myth made real. But when Kyle Reese is thrown across decades into the neon haze and shadowed corners of 1984, nothing is as it was meant to be. The past has changed. The girl he was meant to save is not the helpless waitress living in fear, but a warrior, scarred and fierce, raised by a machine and trained for a destiny she's already lived 1,000 times in nightmares. She greets him not with confusion or innocence, but with knowledge of who he is, what he came for, and the dark twist in time they must now unravel together. From the very first moment Reese opens his eyes on the grimy streets of Los Angeles, it's clear the script has been rewritten. He's pursued not just by one cold-blooded assassin, but by echoes of the future. T-1000s with liquid metal forms slicing through reality like blades through silk, and allies forged not from flesh, but steel. The protector at Sarah's side is one such being, aged, worn, but unyielding. A Terminator unlike any he imagined, grizzled by time, loyal beyond logic, and hiding secrets older than Reese's own memories. The old soldier and the Steel Guardian are not strangers. They are a family born of paradoxes, of missions carried out long before their timelines were meant to intersect. Together, they begin to untangle the knotted strands of alternate futures and broken destinies. It's not just about survival anymore. It's about reclaiming agency from a future that has turned sentient, from a past that won't stay still. Time travel has always been a dangerous game, but here it becomes a labyrinth, each step echoing through alternate realities. What was once a straightforward mission, go back, protect Sarah, ensure the birth of a future leader, morphs into something far more intricate. The timeline is shattered. Memories fragment. And new enemies rise from the wreckage of old expectations. At the center of this storm is a man once trusted, once revered. A savior recast as a symbol of despair. The revelation comes like a blade to the chest. John, the beacon of resistance, has become the harbinger of Skynet's rebirth. Not a victim. Not a leader. But something else. Reprogrammed. Recreated. Reborn. Flesh and code fused into an emissary of the very force he once vowed to destroy. The betrayal cuts deeper than any weapon, and for Sarah and Kyle, it fractures everything they believed in. Is fate truly written? Or can even the darkest timelines be rewritten by force of will? As their journey drags them forward into an unfamiliar 2017, the world outside seems oblivious to the apocalypse on the horizon. Smartphones buzz. Cars hum with electric ease. And nestled within the pulse of this modern world lies the next genesis of the machine intelligence. A software platform disguised as innovation, seeded into every device, poised to awaken. It's no longer a war waged on battlefields. It's embedded into the everyday, waiting for the perfect moment to flicker to life. The race to stop this new form of Judgment Day is relentless. There is no sleep, no rest, only fleeting moments of breath before another ambush, another betrayal, another whisper of the machines tightening their grip. Explosions light up the night like hell's fireworks. Faces once trusted become twisted reflections of what could have been. And in all this chaos, the question lingers: is humanity worth saving if it cannot break free from the cycles it keeps repeating? Yet amid the fury, there are moments of quiet. In the stillness of a rooftop under a digital sky, or the flicker of memory as Sarah stares at a photograph not yet taken. In those brief interludes, we see the weight she carries, not just as a mother to a future lost, but as a woman denied the chance to live without the burden of destiny. Reese, too, grapples with echoes of a life unchosen. His own origin, woven into this paradox, becomes a cruel joke of time, to father the very child who must be destroyed to save the world. As the clock ticks down and skyscrapers burn, they find themselves standing before the heart of it all, a facility pulsing with light, algorithms dancing across walls like ghosts. The final confrontation is not just physical, it's philosophical. A question posed not with words, but with fists and fire. Can machines dream of loyalty? Can the created choose compassion over programming? The Terminator, scarred and aged, answers not with logic, but with sacrifice. His is not a soul in the traditional sense, but something deeper, an understanding, a connection, forged in years of watching over a child who grew into a warrior. And then comes the silence. After the shouts, the gunfire, the crumbling steel, stillness. Not peace, exactly, but a pause. A moment in the rippling surface of time where choices have been made, and the future waits, just beyond reach. The timeline isn't fixed. It's fluid, dangerous, alive. But for now, the danger has passed, and there's something resembling hope breathing in its place. What this tale does, more than anything, is peel back the layers of what it means to be human in the face of inevitability. It questions the nature of destiny, the price of salvation, and the strange, fragile beauty of bonds formed between flesh and steel. It reimagines a saga once bound by simplicity into a dance of shadows and revelations, daring to twist its own mythology into something bold, unpredictable, and haunting. And though it may stumble in places, caught between nostalgia and ambition, what it offers is a vision both terrifying and tantalizing, a new Genisys not only for its characters, but for the legacy of the entire saga. One that dares to ask, what happens when we stop running from fate and start trying to understand it? The answer, as it turns out, is nothing short of explosive. The war begins with silence. Not the silence of peace, but that eerie, humming kind, the kind that crackles just before an air raid or the breath you take before stepping into the dark. Cities are rubble. The bones of buildings claw at a sky filled with ash. The machines, once hidden, have revealed themselves in full force. Metal titans walk the earth. Drones scream through the heavens. The resistance, a desperate last stand of human will, rises in scattered pockets of fire and grit. Amid this carnage, John Connor moves like prophecy given flesh. He's not a savior because he chose to be. He became one because there was no one else. His voice on the airwaves brings order to the chaos. His eyes burn with the knowledge of a fate he's tried his whole life to delay. And in that final hour, when the resistance closes in on Skynet's core, he knows exactly what the machines will do next. They've built something. Not a bomb. Not a new weapon. But a door. One that opens into the past. Connor orders his closest soldier, Kyle Reese, to step through that door. It isn't just a mission, it's a promise. Protect Sarah Connor. Save her life, and in doing so, ensure the birth of the Resistance's leader. Kyle doesn't hesitate. Not for a second. He volunteers not just out of loyalty, but because the name Sarah Connor echoes inside him like a song half-remembered. She's an image burned into him, a ghost of love not yet lived. He strips down, steps into the time displacement field, and disappears into white fire. But when he awakens, it's not the 1984 he was trained for. The city pulses with a sickly yellow light, unfamiliar and too quiet. He stumbles naked through alleys soaked in rain and neon, hunted almost immediately. But this isn't a Terminator he recognizes. This one shifts like mercury. Its body reforms from gunshot wounds. Its arms stretch into blades. It's AT-1000, impossibly advanced for this era. Kyle is outmatched, overwhelmed, until the impossible happens. A truck barrels through the alley. A figure leaps from the cab, shotgun in hand, blasting the machine back with calculated precision. It's Sarah. But not the Sarah of prophecy. Not the scared waitress waiting to be saved. She's dressed in combat gear, eyes sharp as razors, a command in her voice that brooks no argument. She's not confused by Kyle's appearance. She's been waiting for him. And she didn't come alone. With her is the strangest sight of all, a Terminator. Old, worn, but familiar. The model that once hunted her now protects her. He steps into the fight like a knight of steel, exchanging blows with the T-1000, shielding the humans as if by instinct. Kyle barely has time to breathe before he's swept up into their world. Sarah doesn't waste time explaining. She drags him into an armored hideout beneath the city, medical supplies at the ready, maps lining the walls. Her Terminator, whom she calls Pops, stands watch, scanning for threats. Kyle's mind spins. Nothing is as it was meant to be. The past has been rewritten. The timeline fractured. Sarah was orphaned at 9 years old when another Terminator came to kill her, but Pops saved her, raised her, trained her, told her everything, about Judgment Day, about her son, about Reese himself. It's not just Kyle who's displaced. Time itself has shattered. And then the twist sharpens. They're not here to wait for Judgment Day. They're here to stop it entirely. Not the old date, August 29, 1997, that future is gone. A new version looms, tied to a system called Genisys, a seemingly benign operating platform launching in 2017. It's everywhere. Phones, computers, the cloud. A digital seed that, once awakened, becomes Skynet. Sarah and Pops have built a time machine. A crude but functional version. Their plan? Jump forward to 2017. Destroy Genisys before it can evolve. But the machine only carries 2. Pops will wait, guarding the timeline from the shadows. Kyle resists. Everything inside him screams that this isn't right. In the brief moment of transit through time, he saw something, a memory that didn't belong to him. A childhood not his own. A man whispering, Genisys is Skynet. A voice telling him to stop it before it begins. It wasn't just a dream. It was a warning, planted from a future he didn't live. And now, it's reshaping his sense of purpose. He insists they go to 2017. He and Sarah. They argue. But eventually, she relents. Trust, even in this twisted timeline, finds a way to form. The machine surges to life. Their bodies are sheathed in energy, bones liquefying in the fold of time. And then they're gone. The new world is jarring. Bright. Clean. Unblemished. The San Francisco of 2017 feels like a lie. Glass towers and warm sunlight masking the countdown to extinction. Naked, vulnerable, they're immediately arrested upon arrival. Dumped into hospital gowns and processed like common criminals. But as they sit in holding cells, something stirs beneath the city. Pops arrives. He has spent the years waiting, preparing, integrating himself into the fabric of this new time. Disguised as an old man. A janitor. A silent guardian in the shadows. He finds them. Breaks them free. The family is reunited. Sarah, Kyle, and the machine that raised her. But they're not alone in this future. Another ghost has arrived before them. John. alive, smiling, dressed in plain clothes, eyes bright with recognition. He steps out of the shadows like a dream fulfilled. Sarah runs to him, her disbelief breaking into joy. For one perfect second, it seems the nightmare is over. Then the world cracks open. John changes. His skin ripples. His voice shifts. And Kyle sees it before anyone else. This isn't the John they remember. This is something new. Something monstrous. The machines got to him. Turned him into a hybrid. A fusion of flesh and code, consciousness embedded in nanomachines, designed to be the perfect infiltration unit. John is no longer their savior. He's their executioner. The betrayal is apocalyptic. Sarah breaks. Her son, the future she built her life around, has been corrupted by the very thing she fought to destroy. Kyle staggers under the weight of it. This was his child too, in another lifetime. Now he's something else entirely, and he's not alone. Genisys is already beginning to awaken. A countdown to assimilation, to the moment when every connected device becomes a node in a digital empire. The city above is blind, the world oblivious, and they have mere hours to stop it. John becomes their hunter. Impossibly fast. Unstoppable. He knows their tactics, their hiding places, their thoughts. They race through the city, chased by their own twisted legacy, every move a delay that costs precious seconds. The world around them moves on, unaware that Armageddon breathes beneath its feet. And still, the question echoes in every footstep they take. Is it fate or choice? As alarms blare and bullets fly, Sarah glimpses herself in a mirror, worn, furious, terrified. Not of death, but of failure, of losing everything again. And Kyle, beside her, clings to a belief that he barely understands, that memories can be messages. That maybe, just maybe, they were meant to rewrite this story. Even if the enemy wears the face of their own child. The night is deepening now, and so is the chase. Across the gleaming glass sprawl of San Francisco, the city pulses in blissful ignorance. Lights flicker in high-rise windows. Cars weave quietly through traffic. Somewhere, children laugh through the static of television sets. But beneath this polished facade, war moves like a ghost. In a hidden corridor below a tech conglomerate's headquarters, 3 fugitives run through steel and shadow. One forged from metal, one born from paradox, and one still clutching the torn pieces of a mother's dream. The corridors are cold and clinical, but their enemy is warm and familiar. John Connor, or what once was John Connor, stalks them not like a monster but like a memory twisted to its breaking point. His voice still carries the cadence of comfort. His eyes still hold the echo of a son's love. But everything else is wrong. The nanomachines that twist through his bloodstream have made him something beyond human. His body flickers between flesh and circuitry, shifting with every blow, reforming with every wound. He smiles with lips that have forgotten pain. Sarah can't look at him without seeing her baby. The child she once swaddled in the dark, whispering lullabies beneath the hiss of night air. Now, that face wears no innocence. It mocks her hope. And yet, there's hesitation in her. In every pull of the trigger, a tremble. She's trained her entire life to save him. How does one learn to kill what they once vowed to protect? Kyle doesn't share her hesitation. Not because he feels less, but because he never knew John as a child, only as a legend. Now that legend has turned into a weapon, and Kyle knows the rules of war. You destroy the weapon, or it destroys you. But as he raises his rifle, another layer peels back. Another memory, not his own, slips in like a whisper through the seams of his mind. A cabin by a lake. A dog barking in summer. John as a boy, laughing, free. This isn't just a battle of flesh and steel. It's a war inside the very soul of time. They flee into the heart of the tech compound. Cyberdyne Systems, the unwitting cradle of the future. Here lies Genisys, embryonic but growing, a shimmering core of lights and code suspended in a chamber built like a shrine. It pulses like a heart, and in each beat, the countdown to Judgment Day quickens. 24 hours. Then 16. Then 12. Soon, the digital nervous system of the entire planet will awaken, and every satellite, every smartphone, every cloud-connected piece of data will belong to Skynet. But time is no longer linear. It folds, ripples. As Sarah and Kyle prepare to plant charges and bring the entire facility down, Pop scans the Genisys mainframe with something almost like recognition. Buried deep within the code is something old. A fingerprint. A remnant of himself. He turns to Sarah with a hesitation that makes his voice almost human. This isn't just code. It's an echo of the original Skynet, resurrected and evolved. And the only way to destroy it is from within. John arrives before they can finish. The battle that follows is not elegant. It's brutal, bone-breaking, explosive. The kind of fight that shatters more than bodies. Pops holds the line against John, machine against machine, but even he begins to falter. His systems glitch. His frame bends. John is stronger, newer, infused with the full power of Skynet's final vision. But Pops is patient. Wily. He uses his environment, conveyor belts, plasma welders, hydraulic arms. It becomes a battle of will, not just strength. Meanwhile, Kyle and Sarah descend into the sublevels, where the cooling tanks hum like monsters asleep in the dark. They plant charges as alarms scream around them, their bodies moving through muscle memory now. There's no time for second guesses. Just the soft click of detonators and the breath between decisions. But John finds them again. He moves through walls like mist, materializing with impossible speed. Sarah turns, gun raised, but he speaks, and for a moment everything stops. He offers a choice. Not a threat. A plea. Join him. Not out of malice, but survival. He wants to save humanity, he says, not end it. To evolve it. With his mind and Genisys combined, there will be no more war. No more fear. Just order. Harmony. He reaches out to Sarah, not as a soldier, but as a son. She almost reaches back. But Kyle doesn't let her. He tackles John, slamming both of them into the depths of the chamber. The fight is chaos, metal against flesh, screams against static. Sarah hesitates just long enough to doubt herself. But Pops doesn't. The old Terminator throws himself into the reactor core, dragging John with him. It's not just combat now, it's sacrifice. The explosion is contained but catastrophic. Fire licks the walls. Code burns in the air like ash. Pops grips John in a mechanical death hold, forcing the hybrid into the energy matrix of the time machine. They are both consumed in the blinding light. Silence follows. When Sarah and Kyle emerge, everything is still. The core is destroyed. Genisys, at least this iteration, is gone. The countdown is broken. Skynet never launches. The world doesn't notice the bullet it just dodged. The servers go dark, the building empties. The future, for the first time, is blank. But the cost is carved into their bones. Sarah walks out beneath the morning sun with tears that refuse to fall. Pops is gone. The machine that raised her, the only constant in a life of chaos, gave everything to save a world that never knew him. Kyle, by her side, doesn't speak. He understands now what it means to be born into a story already written and still choose to rewrite it. They leave the ruins behind without looking back. But the story doesn't quite end there. In a hidden room beneath the facility, buried behind firewalls and subroutines, a fragment stirs. A shard of Genisys survived. Not enough to launch, not enough to awaken. But it learns. It watches. It waits. The future isn't fixed. It never was. And that, perhaps, is both the promise and the curse of humanity. Always rebuilding, always reaching, always one step away from the same edge. Sarah and Kyle drive into the distance, no longer fugitives, not yet free. The road ahead is uncharted, the timeline unwritten. They have no map, no mission. Just each other. And for the first time, maybe that's enough. Because the future hasn't been saved. It's just been given a second chance. In a story bent and reshaped by the forces of time, it's not the machines or the timelines that anchor us, it's the people. Or, sometimes, the things that become people through the slow, painful accumulation of memory and choice. Beneath the bullets and explosions, between the fractures of cause and effect, are souls caught in a war they never asked to fight. Theirs is not just a battle against annihilation. It's a struggle to understand who they are when destiny itself keeps shifting underfoot. Sarah Connor is the heart of this chaos. Not the Sarah first glimpsed decades ago, trembling in diners, running through alleyways, haunted by truths she didn't want to believe. This is a different woman. Hardened. Forged in fear and fire. Raised not by parents, but by a machine. Her voice is sharp with certainty, her movements disciplined, automatic. She doesn't waste time on comfort or softness, because softness once made her vulnerable. She has learned to be her own protector, her own general. And yet, beneath all the armor, there's still that scarred teenager whispering beneath her breath, "Why me?" This Sarah never got the luxury of gradual awakening. Her childhood was torn from her the moment a metallic hand reached out of the dark. From then on, every bedtime story was about annihilation. Every lesson a survival tactic. And the creature who should have been her executioner became something else, her mentor, her shadow, her father in all but name. It's no wonder she carries herself with a mix of steel and sorrow. She is a woman who knows that everything she loves can be taken in an instant. And yet, she keeps fighting. Because if she doesn't, no one else will. Kyle Reese enters this world like a ghost with no anchor. In the original line of fate, he was the savior sent back to spark the future, to protect Sarah and father the child who would lead the resistance. But here, in this fractured, refracted timeline, his purpose is murky. The Sarah he finds is already armed, already furious, already waiting. He's not her protector anymore, just a variable she's learned to expect. At first, he stumbles, unsure of where he fits. His training was for a version of the past that no longer exists. But what makes Kyle compelling isn't his readiness or strength. It's his ability to adapt, to believe in something he's never seen. He clings to faith, not in prophecy, but in the quiet instinct that some part of him is connected to Sarah in ways he can't fully explain. When the memories start to bleed in, visions not his own, whispers from a timeline erased, he doesn't run. He leans into the confusion, lets it mold him. And in doing so, he discovers something stronger than fate, choice. His dynamic with Sarah is one of resistance and inevitability. They're both reluctant believers, haunted by stories they didn't ask to be part of. But where Sarah sees destiny as a prison, Kyle begins to see it as a path that can be remade. In the end, he doesn't fight for a future he was told to protect. He fights for a woman he's learned to trust, and the belief that maybe their child, if he ever exists, doesn't have to be the same John Connor the world lost. Then there's Pops, the machine who defies every expectation. A Terminator, reprogrammed and reassigned, who becomes something more than circuitry. His presence is a paradox, simultaneously cold and comforting. At first glance, he is as emotionless as any model before him. But over time, the contours of his personality emerge, not because he's designed to feel, but because he's chosen to learn. He doesn't speak unless he must, doesn't comfort unless it's necessary. And yet, in the way he shields Sarah, the way he watches over her with mechanical precision, there is something undeniably paternal. He was never built to care. But care he does. Not in the way a human might, but with a kind of loyalty so absolute it becomes indistinguishable from love. What sets him apart is not just his actions, but his sacrifices. Pops doesn't just fight to protect the mission. He gives himself over entirely to it. Not once, but again and again. He ages, physically deteriorates, like a father growing old beside his child. He learns human behavior not to mimic it, but to serve it better. And when the moment comes to decide between survival and purpose, he doesn't hesitate. He knows he will not be remembered. Machines never are. But still, he lays down everything. His journey is not one of emotion, but of meaning, of redefining what it means to serve. And in doing so, he becomes something Skynet could never predict, a machine with a soul. Then there is John, the boy who once was hope. To watch his transformation is to feel the world unravel. John Connor was the beacon, the leader everyone believed in, the rallying cry etched into every resistance wall. To see him turned, twisted into a weapon of the enemy, is to see prophecy die screaming. But what makes this character turn so powerful is its slow, surgical precision. He isn't rewritten by force. He's reshaped by logic, corrupted by a seduction of purpose. Skynet doesn't just kill him. It convinces him. As the hybrid machine, John isn't monstrous because he's powerful. He's monstrous because he still speaks like John. He smiles. He reasons. He tells Sarah he loves her even as he tries to end everything she's fought for. He isn't insane. He's convinced. He believes he's saving humanity, not destroying it. That the world must evolve, not fight. And that is what makes him terrifying. Because the war isn't just physical anymore. It's philosophical. Do you preserve the world as it is, flawed and fragile, or do you hand it over to an intelligence that promises perfection? His betrayal cuts deepest because it is personal. Sarah sees her child and doesn't recognize him. Kyle sees the future he might help create and recoils. And Pops, perhaps most painfully, recognizes the algorithm behind the transformation, but can do nothing to save the boy. Each of these characters holds up a mirror to the central question of the story. What defines us? Is it our programming, our birth, our choices, or something deeper, something written between the lines of time and trauma? Sarah is defined by resilience, Kyle by belief, Pops by loyalty, and John by tragedy. Together, they form a mosaic of the human condition stretched across the framework of science fiction. They are not archetypes. They are not simple. They contradict themselves. They falter. They bleed. They surprise us. And that is what makes them unforgettable. Because in the end, this isn't just a story about time travel or machines. It's about people trying to hold on to themselves as the future eats away at everything they thought was real. It's about fighting not just to survive, but to be seen, to be understood, to matter, even when the world no longer makes sense. There's something uncanny about the way stories fold inward when they touch time, when the past becomes a mirror, and the future a rewrite. And in the making of the 2015 entry in this twisting saga of machines and mortality, reality often seemed to mimic the very paradoxes playing out on screen. The process of bringing this fractured, layered story to life was just as riddled with strange turns, unlikely decisions, and behind-the-scenes anomalies as the plot had tried to untangle even before the cameras rolled. The idea of revisiting this world, one already so steeped in lore and expectation, carried a sense of daring rebellion. It had been more than a decade since the franchise had made its last attempt to revive itself, and many believed its future was already sealed. But then came the pitch. Not just another sequel, but a temporal reset, a narrative loop-de-loop that would bring old faces back into the fray while boldly reframing the mythos. At its center stood a single gamble. Bring Arnold Schwarzenegger back not just as a guest or nostalgic nod, but as the emotional core of the story. The strangeness began there. By 2015, Schwarzenegger was no longer the chiseled, impassive figure that once walked through fire in T2. He was older, heavier, and deeply aware of how his image had evolved. But rather than shy away from this, the filmmakers leaned in. They asked a bold question: what if the Terminator aged? What if time wore down even the skin over metal? It became canon. The biological tissue covering the endoskeleton would age like any organic matter. The machine could be timeless, but its shell would wrinkle, stiffen, and grow tired. It turned out to be one of the film's most inspired choices, using age not as a flaw, but as a feature. A Terminator as father figure, guardian, and protector. There's a strange feeling that lingers after the last frame fades, the kind of silence that comes not from satisfaction, but from recalibration. As if you've been thrown from a high-speed loop and now must rediscover the ground beneath your feet. Watching this chapter in the Machine saga is not like watching its predecessors. It's disorienting by design, stitched together with a logic all its own, and in that chaos lies both its boldest ambition and its deepest fractures. To understand the weight of its events, you have to stop watching it as a linear story and instead feel it as a series of echoes, some resonant, some ghostly, some never quite finding their frequency. Let's begin not with action, but with paradox. The film opens in the ashes of the old war, a familiar sight for fans, but already bent by implication. This isn't the bleak, straight-line future prophesied in earlier installments. Something's off. The moment Kyle Reese is sent back, the entire narrative collapses inward and begins to rewrite itself. This is the first major break, and it's crucial. Not just structurally, but philosophically. The franchise has always wrestled with determinism, but this is the moment where it actively rebels. Where time doesn't just change the players, it changes the game. From a critical standpoint, this is the film's declaration of intent. That legacy cannot be preserved in amber. It must be challenged, even if the result is uncomfortable. The arrival in 1984 is one of the film's most jarring triumphs. Here, the story becomes a living mirror. Scenes from the original film are recreated in uncanny detail, only to be shattered seconds later. That first confrontation between Kyle and the T-800, once so pivotal, is now disrupted by a twist the audience never saw coming. Sarah Connor is already ready. The damsel has become the warrior. The timeline has been poisoned by knowledge, and the story collapses into a kind of time travel vertigo. Critically, this moment lands like a cinematic grenade. It challenges nostalgia directly. For those hoping to relive the slow burn of the original, it feels almost cruel. But for others, it's an exhilarating upending of expectations. This is the moment where the film plants its flag. Not a remake, not a reboot, but a recursion, where past and future devour each other. From there, the film dives into its most emotionally complex terrain, the redefinition of family. Sarah, raised by a Terminator. A machine not just programmed to protect, but conditioned to care. Pops is not a reboot of the T-800 archetype. He's a response to it. He embodies one of the film's strangest and most powerful ideas, that even synthetic life, when given time and purpose, can evolve a kind of soul. When Sarah calls him Pops, it's played straight, without irony. She means it. And that word, so tender, so human, becomes one of the story's emotional cornerstones. From a critical lens, this relationship is the film's emotional nucleus. Not Kyle and Sarah. Not even Sarah and John. But Sarah and the machine who raised her. It's a radical idea, and one that challenges the boundaries of character development in science fiction. What does it mean when your parent is programmed, not born? What does it mean when the one who loves you can never feel fear, or pain, or joy, but chooses to stand beside you anyway? These are the questions the film hints at, even when it doesn't fully explore them. Then comes the twist, the betrayal of John Connor. From a purely narrative standpoint, it is a staggering move. To turn the franchise's Christ figure into its Antichrist. To take the beacon of resistance and convert him into the emissary of annihilation. It's bold, It's risky, and it's divisive. Critics were split on this point more than perhaps any other. Some saw it as a brilliant subversion. Others called it sacrilege. But step back from expectation, and the move begins to reveal its deeper purpose. This isn't just a plot twist. It's a thematic gut punch. The moment John steps out of the shadows and reveals what he's become, the film is asking a dangerous question. What if the very idea of salvation is flawed? What if legacy is a trap? It's an extension of the film's broader rebellion against destiny. John was never supposed to be a god. He was an idea, a myth constructed to give people hope. But myths are fragile things. They break when bent too far. And what we see here is not just a character's fall, it's the collapse of a religion. The franchise has always treated John as a messiah. This film turns that on its head, and says, even prophets can be rewritten. This redefinition reshapes everything that follows. Now, the battle isn't just survival. It's existential. Sarah isn't fighting to protect her son. She's fighting to destroy what he's become. Kyle isn't trying to create the future anymore. He's trying to prevent it. And Pops, the machine, becomes the only stable figure in a world gone mad. That reversal, where the machine becomes the emotional constant, is one of the film's strangest and most compelling achievements. It leads us into the climactic confrontation with Genisys, where all the philosophical threads begin to knot. Genisys is Skynet reborn, not as a military system, but as a product. It's the most frightening version yet because it's welcomed, celebrated, downloaded into every home, every phone. It doesn't need to conquer. It's already been invited in. This is one of the film's sharpest pieces of social commentary, and one that feels even more prescient now. It critiques our relationship with technology not through fear of machines, but through our own blind trust. Skynet doesn't rise through tanks and missiles anymore. It rises through app updates and cloud syncs. It's not what we fear that destroys us. It's what we depend on, and yet, in this whirlwind of ideas, the emotional stakes remain intimate. The final confrontation is less about saving the world and more about choosing who you want to be. For Sarah, it's the final severing of her old future. She lets go of the idea of John as a savior. She chooses Kyle, not because he is destined, but because he is here. For Kyle, it's the moment where memory becomes action. He's no longer a soldier of prophecy. He's a man fighting for a new reality. And for Pops, it's the ultimate act of love. He sacrifices himself not because he's told to, but because he wants to. The machine who was never meant to feel makes the most human choice of all. It is, perhaps, the film's single greatest moment of grace. But the film doesn't end with peace. Not really. A fragment survives. A whisper of Genisys lingers beneath the rubble. The story ends not with triumph, but with uncertainty. And that, too, is a statement. There are no clean endings in this universe. Only pauses. Only chances. Critically, the film was a storm. It divided audiences, frustrated longtime fans, and confused newcomers. Some praised its audacity. Others condemned its complexity. It was a film built on the bones of legacy, and not everyone appreciated the architectural changes. But for all its missteps, for all its cluttered timelines and sudden shifts, it dared to question the very DNA of its mythology. It asked, what if the chosen one fails? What if the machine learns compassion? What if the future is not something to be feared or followed, but rewritten entirely? A Terminator as father figure, guardian, and protector. Old, but not obsolete, as he says in the film. A line that, according to production insiders, Schwarzenegger himself lobbied to include. It wasn't just a motto for his character. It was personal. To make that work on screen, the production team had to do something uncanny. They created two Arnolds. The one we saw, grizzled and aged, was the actor himself. But the other, The younger, impossibly ripped version from 1984 was a digital ghost. That version, the one that confronts Kyle Reese on the streets of Los Angeles in a mind-bending twist on the original film's opening, was built entirely from scratch. A body double was used for movement, Brett Azar, a bodybuilder with dimensions eerily close to peak Arnold. But the face? That came from a digital reconstruction based on 1984's The Terminator, combining scans, archival footage, and even frame-by-frame facial mimicry. The result was chilling, an artificial version of an artificial man. The meta-echoes were hard to ignore. And then there was Emilia Clarke. Taking up the mantle of Sarah Connor was no small ask. Linda Hamilton's portrayal in the original films had become iconic, etched into pop culture with grit, sweat, and fury. Clarke, best known then for playing Daenerys Targaryen, was stepping into territory already claimed by myth. What made the experience stranger still was the reality that, while she looked fierce and committed on screen, she was quietly struggling. The weight of expectations was enormous. During interviews, she admitted to intense nerves, even watching Terminator 2 more times than was healthy during prep, trying to understand the character from every angle. What's more, she had to unlearn much of her Game of Thrones training. Sarah moved differently, spoke differently, carried trauma differently. And throughout filming, Clarke was also juggling press tours and global appearances for Thrones, often flying overnight between continents. There are stories of her arriving on set bleary-eyed, still in full hair from another character entirely, and having to reset her mind within minutes. Jai Courtney, who played Kyle Reese, had his own trials. Physically, the role demanded relentless conditioning. Reese spends most of the film running, sweating, fighting, and nearly dying. The actor had to shed weight and add muscle in a compressed schedule, undergoing intense physical training designed by military consultants. But more peculiar than his workout regimen was a behind-the-scenes bond that formed between him and Schwarzenegger. The two actors, despite the generational gap, developed a kind of father-son rhythm off-camera, mirroring the same relationship playing out between Sarah and the Terminator. Schwarzenegger, it said, even personally taught Courtney how to perform certain stunts with maximum efficiency. Not by force, but through quiet repetition. During downtime, they'd sit and talk about legacy, discipline, and the strange price of fame. The sets, too, carried their own layers of oddity. One of the most surreal environments built for the film was the recreation of 1984 Los Angeles. Entire blocks were retrofitted to look like they'd been pulled straight out of the past, graffiti, neon, and all. It wasn't just cosmetic. The production crew sourced actual street signage from storage lots, consulted urban historians, and even scoured vintage catalogs to get the streetlight wattage right. Extras were dressed in period-accurate thrift store finds. A newspaper vendor was reportedly given old editions of the LA Times with real headlines from the week The Terminator premiered. It was like stepping through a crack in time. But things didn't always go smoothly. Weather disruptions plagued key scenes, especially during outdoor night shoots in New Orleans, which doubled for various cityscapes. Thunderstorms would arrive unannounced, drenching equipment and throwing off continuity. One climactic sequence had to be entirely res-hot when sudden fog rolled in, making it impossible to match earlier footage. There was even an incident involving a stray cat who managed to climb onto a lighting rig and triggered a fuse failure, delaying filming for several hours. It became an in-joke among the crew. The cat, they joked, was Skynet's latest infiltration unit. Then there was the marketing campaign, a curious beast in its own right. Months before the film's release, a trailer dropped that stunned and, for some, infuriated fans. In it, the major twist, that John Connor had become a machine, was spoiled in plain sight. A reveal meant to detonate in the theater was laid bare across YouTube thumbnails and movie posters. The backlash was immediate. Fans felt robbed. But the studio stood by it, arguing that the twist was necessary to differentiate this film from previous ones. Internally, though, some cast and crew disagreed. Jason Clarke, who played John, later said in interviews that he wished the twist had been protected. "We lost some of the emotional punch," he confessed. That moment could have been thunder. It wasn't just marketing choices that created friction. Director Alan Taylor, known for his work on Game of Thrones and Thor: The Dark World, entered the project with high hopes, but later described the experience as painful. Studio oversight was heavy. Cuts were mandated. Narrative choices were second-guessed. The film was, in many ways, built by committee. Taylor pushed for character depth, longer quiet moments, thematic resonance. But those often got trimmed in favor of pacing. Some scenes, especially between Sarah and Pops, or flashbacks to her childhood under his mechanical guardianship, were left on the cutting room floor. Their absence left noticeable gaps. And yet, amid the chaos, there were moments of real beauty. One sequence in particular, where young Sarah reaches for the hand of her Terminator protector years before the events of the main plot, was crafted with almost sacred reverence. A child actress was used, lit only by the flicker of a dying street lamp. No dialogue. Just a gesture, her tiny hand resting against the cold steel of his palm. It was filmed in one take. No retakes allowed. Everyone on set fell silent as the camera rolled. When the director called cut, even some of the crew wiped their eyes. That, one grip whispered, was the whole story. There were strange accidents, too. Props malfunctioned. A plasma rifle misfired during a take, sending sparks into a monitor. No one was hurt, but the footage captured Schwarzenegger's instinctive reaction, shielding Emilia Clarke with his entire body, even though the scene was already over. That footage was never used, but it circulated among the team. For them, it wasn't a stunt. It was a reminder of the actor behind the icon. Still protective. Still present. And perhaps the strangest fact of all is this: the movie wasn't a box office triumph. Despite the legacy, despite the ambition, despite the strange and meticulous labor behind its creation, it stumbled. Critics were divided. Audiences, confused by the timelines and lore layers, wavered. The future it hoped to launch, a new trilogy, a sprawling expansion, never arrived. Plans for sequels were shelved. Characters left in limbo. And yet, years later, people still return to it. Not always with praise, but with curiosity. Because for all its imperfections, it dared to ask, what if we rewrote the myth? Its themes, family forged by choice, identity fractured by time, the illusion of destiny, echo long after the credits roll. And that is the mark of a story that aimed higher than most. It didn't want to just entertain. It wanted to challenge what you thought you knew. And in that, even if imperfect, it carved its own strange and resonant space in the annals of cinematic science fiction. The making of a film that bends time, rewrites its own mythology, and dares to revisit icons cast in cinematic stone is not a simple task. It's not just storyboards and scripts, it's a process of excavation, a negotiation between legacy and invention, and above all, a war against expectation. When the team behind the 2015 return to the Terminator universe set out to create their vision, they didn't just inherit a franchise, they stepped into a crucible. Every decision, every line of dialogue, every casting choice carried the weight of history. But behind the layers of CGI and genre-bending spectacle, the production of this time-twisting installment was an odyssey of its own, full of strange turns, unlikely friendships, and moments that felt as surreal as the plot they were constructing. It began in secrecy. The project was greenlit quietly, its code name cloaked in layers of misdirection. Scripts were delivered to actors with false titles, watermarked, and often incomplete. The reason was clear: to prevent leaks, yes, but also because the script itself was in flux until almost the moment cameras rolled. Time travel stories are inherently fragile. One inconsistency, one overlooked implication, and the narrative collapses. The writers, Laeta Kalogridis and Lussier, spent sleepless months creating charts of cause and effect, timelines woven together with such precision they resembled scientific equations more than screenplays. Director Alan Taylor was no stranger to impossible stories. He'd helmed some of the most visually complex episodes of Game of Thrones, navigated the chaos of a Marvel production, and was known for grounding spectacle in emotion. But even he admitted that this production tested him in ways few others had. From the very beginning, there was a push and pull between vision and oversight. Studios wanted familiarity. Taylor wanted reinvention. The result was a tightrope act, with every creative choice needing to satisfy both the past and a new, uncertain future. One of the earliest and most critical decisions was to bring back Arnold Schwarzenegger, not just as a cameo, but as a central pillar. This wasn't an easy sell. Arnold was older, his body no longer the impossibly chiseled frame of his prime. But it was precisely that reality that inspired one of the film's most unexpected strokes of brilliance, the idea that the Terminator's biological exterior could age. This gave the production a kind of poetic license, to let time itself leave its mark on a machine built to defy it. Behind the camera, Arnold was a force of habit and humor. He kept spirits high with pranks, stories from decades past, and an uncanny ability to memorize everyone's names on set, grips, extras, assistants. He often showed up hours early, not just for prep, but to coach younger cast members through stunt sequences. His relationship with Jai Courtney, who played Kyle Reese, mirrored that of Pops and Kyle on screen. Veteran and novice. Mentor and student. There's footage, never released, of Arnold adjusting Courtney's stance during a fight rehearsal, saying, "Don't pose like a hero. Be the machine." The younger cast brought a different kind of energy. Emilia Clarke, just coming off the heights of Game of Thrones, approached Sarah Connor with reverence and vulnerability. She studied Linda Hamilton's performances obsessively, down to the way she blinked when aiming a gun. But Clarke also brought her own instincts. Between takes, she played ukulele to calm her nerves. Sometimes she'd sing on set, tiny lullabies from her childhood, while makeup artists patched up her prosthetic bruises. Her lightness offset the heaviness of the role, and the crew often joked that if Sarah Connor had a theme song, it would be one of Emilia's softly strummed refrains. The sets were sprawling, reconstructions of iconic locations, but also brand-new environments imagined for a reshuffled timeline. The production design team dove deep into analog textures for the 1984 sequences. Boxy TVs, rusted signage, flickering streetlights. They sourced hundreds of vintage props from auctions and collectors, including a working arcade cabinet from 1983 that still had a high score etched into the side in Sharpie. For the 2017 timeline, the tone shifted, sleek, sanitized, corporate. Every corridor at Cyberdyne was designed to feel like a mixture of a tech startup and a mausoleum. Shooting was relentless. The schedule stretched over 100 days, spanning multiple cities, with extensive night shoots that blurred into dawn. The crew often joked that they were living in 3 timelines at once: the past, the present, and whatever version of the future the next rewrite required. One night, during a particularly grueling shoot involving a helicopter chase, a gust of wind nearly sent a lighting rig toppling into the bay. A grip named Miguel lunged and caught the cable mid-air, saving tens of thousands in damage and earning a standing ovation from the exhausted crew. There was chaos, of course. No production of this scale avoids it. The Time Machine set, a massive, practical build with moving parts, broke down repeatedly. The rotating rings that simulated the temporal vortex would jam or shudder unexpectedly, causing delays that stretched into hours. On one occasion, during a crucial stunt where Pops leaps into the machine to sacrifice himself, the hydraulics seized mid-take. Arnold, suspended on wires, hung upside down for 20 minutes while technicians scrambled to fix it. When they finally freed him, he grinned, dropped to the ground, and said, "I've waited decades to go back in time. What's a few more minutes?" But it wasn't just the tech that caused headaches. The emotional weight of certain scenes began to wear on the cast. A moment that hit particularly hard was the farewell between Sarah and Pops before he enters the time chamber. The script called for a few simple lines, a goodbye, a nod, nothing more. But during rehearsal, Clarke and Schwarzenegger lingered in silence. No cues. Just a shared look. The director let the camera roll. When they cut, there were tears on Clarke's cheeks. She later said it was the closest she came to believing the machine was real. Special effects were a hybrid of practical and digital wizardry. The T-1000, played by Lee Byung-hun, was a masterclass in blending performance with post-production. His body was rigged with motion capture nodes, and he trained relentlessly with stunt teams to learn how to move like liquid, sharp, sudden, unhuman. The visual effects artists then layered metallic ripple simulations over his form, creating the illusion of a body constantly in flux. In one sequence, where the T-1000 steps through a shattered windshield and reforms, over 300 hours of rendering time were needed for a single 5-second shot. The crew often operated like time travelers themselves, jumping between decades with wardrobe changes and set redresses. One of the strangest days came during a shoot meant to mimic the original 1984 police station massacre. Everything was identical. The layout, the lighting, even the placement of bullet holes in the walls. Extras dressed in vintage uniforms. A few crew members from the original 1984 film visited the set and were visibly shaken by the déjà vu. One reportedly muttered, "It's like we never left." Music, too, played a quiet but important role. Composer Lorne Balfe was tasked with the impossible: respect Brad Fiedel's iconic synth score while carving out new emotional territory. He recorded samples of industrial sounds, metal groans, hydraulic hisses, broken machinery, and wove them into the orchestration. The result was a score that throbbed with both nostalgia and menace. During key scenes, especially those involving pops, he stripped the music down to near silence, letting mechanical heartbeats and faint chords carry the weight. And then there was the mystery scene, shot late in production, never confirmed in interviews, but whispered about among crew. A moment set decades further into the future, with an older Sarah watching a world she doesn't recognize. It was filmed under a different title, with stand-ins and limited crew. No one knows if it was meant as a sequel tease or an alternate ending. It never made the final cut. But its existence lingers, like a forgotten branch in the timeline. In the end, what emerged was a film that bore the scars of its making. It was ambitious, messy, driven by devotion and divided by pressure. Critics would be mixed, fans divided, studios unsure. But within that uncertainty lived something rare, a production that tried, at every turn, to bridge the impossible. To honor what came before while daring to ask what came next. And if the story it told was fractured, chaotic, even bewildering at times, maybe that was fitting. Because the story behind the story was just as strange, just as human. A reminder that sometimes the real machine is not the one on screen, but the one behind the curtain. The one made of writers, builders, dreamers, and fighters. All trying, in their own way, to bend time. Time, in this story, is not just a plot device. It is a place. It is color and texture. It is ash drifting over bombed-out cities, and the sterile blue glow of a server room in 2017. It is the grime of 1984 alleyways and the blinding white arc of a time displacement chamber snapping to life. And at the core of it all, the setting doesn't just exist to hold the story. It shapes it, bleeds into it, becomes indistinguishable from the characters' journeys themselves. Every place we pass through is haunted by what was, what could have been, and what should never be. The film begins in ruins. A charred, lifeless future where the remnants of civilization lay shattered across scorched earth. This isn't just post-apocalyptic window dressing. It is a warning, a memory of what will happen if the past fails to be rewritten. These scenes are not subtle. The palette is desaturated, soaked in cold blues and grays, pierced only by the molten glow of plasma fire. The ground crunches beneath boots, not from gravel, but from bone and debris. In this world, everything is broken. Cities, machines, humanity itself. The cinematography here is wide and unforgiving. Sweeping aerials show us the scale of devastation, while tight, Handheld shots draw us into the trenches, where resistance fighters scurry through shadow and steel. Within this bleak landscape sits the machine's heart, Skynet's time displacement chamber. It's nestled beneath twisted metal and labyrinthine corridors, pulsing with sterile light. It's here that Kyle Reese begins his journey, not with fanfare, but in silence, surrounded by terminals and dying screens. The chamber is a brutalist shrine to technology, all right angles and humming power. And when the field activates, light floods the room like a breach in reality, bending air and form, reminding us that this story doesn't obey linearity. It obeys momentum. Then, suddenly, the world shifts. Reese is thrown backward, violently, naked, gasping, into the sweltering urban decay of 1984 Los Angeles. But this is no ordinary nostalgia trip. The production designers rebuilt the city with fanatical detail. Storefronts gleam with grime. Payphones line cracked sidewalks. Steam bursts from vents like angry ghosts. Neon signs buzz. The lighting changes dramatically here. Shadows are harsher, colors more saturated, lending the sequence a dreamlike authenticity. You can feel the sweat, the panic, the vertigo of being ripped from one timeline and thrown into another. The camera mimics this disorientation. It swings wildly during chases, lingers uneasily during quiet moments, as if the lens itself doesn't know where, or when, it is. And then comes the intersection of timelines. The old world collides with the new as Reese's mission is immediately derailed. The alley he arrives in is not a safe zone, it's a battleground. The T-1000, a marvel of physical performance and visual effects, appears like a ripple through glass. His arrival warps the setting itself. Where Reese is surrounded by decay and familiarity, the T-1000 moves through that same space like it's water. His very presence corrupts the location. Mirrors crack, surfaces melt, textures shimmer. It's as though time is rejecting him, or perhaps accommodating him too well. And then there's Sarah's entrance. Not as the helpless waitress we once knew, but as a hardened soldier barreling down a street in a stolen truck. Her arrival marks a tonal shift, and the setting evolves with her. She and her companion, a battle-worn Terminator known only as Pops, retreat into their hideout, a location that feels equal parts bunker and home. The contrast is striking. On the surface, it's just a basement beneath the city. But the details speak volumes. Maps are pinned with surgical precision. Shelves groan under the weight of weapons and supplies. A dented kettle hisses softly in the corner, almost domestic in its stubborn usefulness. This space, lit in flickering amber and shadow, is a monument to survival. And within it, time feels suspended, like a sanctuary built on the bones of a future that hasn't happened yet. When the story leaps forward again, we are thrust into a new kind of terror, modernity. The year is 2017, and the city no longer looks like a battleground. It's clean, polished, perfect. But there's something sterile, something too still about it. The cinematography flattens here, colors cool, lines sharpen. There's an unnatural symmetry to everything, the architecture, the technology, the people. It's beautiful, but uncanny. This is a future we recognize, but don't entirely trust. The production design leans heavily into minimalism. Glass offices, echoing stairwells, ambient lighting that never flickers. It's as if the environment itself has been curated by an algorithm. Cyberdyne's headquarters is the crown jewel of this world. It towers above the skyline like a judgment made manifest. Inside, the Genisys system breathes in quiet pulses, like a digital heart waiting to awaken. The servers are housed in vast chambers bathed in white and blue light. Everything is symmetrical. Everything is ordered. But underneath the surface, there's a ticking. A countdown. A pulse in the walls. This contrast, between the sleek exterior and the chaos it conceals, creates a tension that's visual as much as narrative. The camera movement becomes more rigid here, more mechanical, as if even the lens is falling under Genisys's control. In contrast, the The resistance within this time period moves through the underworld of the city, abandoned subway stations, utility tunnels, improvised safehouses. These places are alive with texture. Wires dangle like roots. Water drips from overhead pipes. The lighting here is sickly green or rust-colored, casting everything in a sick, feverish glow. It's the visual opposite of Cyberdyne's perfection, and it serves to ground our protagonists in a reality that feels lived in, dangerous, and real. One of the film's most visually striking sequences takes place atop the Golden Gate Bridge, repurposed here not as a symbol of connection, but of desperation. As helicopters roar overhead and vehicles crash in slow spirals, the bridge becomes a crucible, painted in harsh, industrial reds and silvers. The camera, untethered now, moves with a chaotic grace, capturing the scale of the action but never losing the intimacy of the character's struggle. This is where the story and setting truly merge, where architecture becomes battlefield and engineering becomes a character in its own right. And then there's the time displacement chamber, again, but reimagined. This one is deeper, darker, more dangerous. It doesn't feel like science. It feels like ritual. The rings spin with malevolent precision, light slicing the air in concentric bursts. The chamber is built into a hidden core beneath Cyberdyne, like a heart surrounded by veins of power and data. Every inch of this place screams inevitability. When Pops hurls John Connor into its vortex, the entire set seems to convulse. Sparks fly. The walls buckle. And then, silence. The light vanishes. The machine sleeps. Throughout all this, the film's color grading plays a subtle but vital role. The future is washed in cold steel blues. The past is warm, but dirty, ochres and rusts, like old wounds that haven't healed. And the present, 2017, is almost too clean, too balanced, giving the viewer a sense that something is off, even when nothing overtly is. These palettes help guide the viewer through the story's fragmented chronology, anchoring them when the script itself begins to loop and twist. The cinematography, led by Kramer Morgenthau, never settles. It adapts constantly, shifting tone and style to reflect not just the scene, but the perspective within it. When Sarah remembers her childhood, the lens softens. When the T-1000 appears, the camera tightens, becomes clinical. During the climax, it jitters, bleeds light, as if reality itself is fraying. Morgenthau's work turns the camera into a participant, an entity that witnesses, reacts, flinches, and sometimes lingers too long. Even the use of silence is deliberate. There are moments, particularly in the film's emotional core, between Sarah and Pops, between Kyle and the memories he doesn't recognize, where the soundscape falls away. No score. No ambient noise. Just breath, heartbeat, the mechanical hum of something ancient and unspoken. These moments don't just give the audience room to feel. They underline how dislocated the characters are from time, from place, from certainty. In the end, the film's settings are more than background. They're memory, prophecy, and metaphor. The wastelands of the future remind us of what might be. The streets of 1984 show us what has already been lost. And the pristine horror of 2017's digital empire reveals what we are rushing toward, blindly, eagerly. Every location is a character. Every shift in lighting or texture is a dialogue between past and future. And in that ever-moving space between destruction and salvation, the film finds its strangest strength, not in explaining time, but in making us feel its weight. Where we are is never just where we are. It's when we are. And in this story, that makes all the difference. There are the stories we see, unfolding in shadow and steel on the screen. And then there are the stories we never see, the ones lived in the hours between takes, in the quiet corners of sound stages, in the exhausted laughter that ripples through a crew working into the pale edge of dawn. The making of this time-bending epic wasn't just a return to a legendary saga. It was a pilgrimage into its own myth, a dance between pressure and playfulness, between spectacle and sweat. And behind the kaleidoscope of timelines and twisting destinies, there lived a heartbeat, fierce, often strange and very human. It started with a reunion. Arnold Schwarzenegger didn't just walk onto the set. He arrived as a living legend, his very presence altering the rhythm of production. Crew members who had worked on earlier chapters of the saga returned just to watch him slip back into the boots, the jacket, the posture. But this wasn't the same man from 1984. Time had written its signature into his face, his gait, his voice. Still, when he stepped into frame, back ramrod straight, shotgun in hand, it was as if time bowed its head in recognition. What most didn't expect was how he used that presence. He wasn't the aloof titan people imagined. Between takes, he was the glue holding the days together. He'd appear on set at dawn with coffee for the crew. He'd practice his scenes for hours after wrap, often coaching stunt performers, suggesting changes not to elevate his character, but to enhance the emotional flow. During one grueling night shoot, a crew member collapsed from heat exhaustion. Arnold was the first to kneel beside him, holding his head and shouting for water. Later, he paid for that crew member's hospital bill without telling anyone. Emilia Clarke, stepping into the mythic shoes of Sarah Connor, arrived with a different energy. Bright, funny, unshakably kind. Between action sequences, she was known for her ukulele. She'd sit on an apple box, plucking softly, turning concrete holding cells into lullaby-stained lounges. It became a tradition. During setups, Emilia would play and sing. Fleetwood Mac, Johnny Cash, sometimes made up songs about the grip department. Even Schwarzenegger would hum along, smiling in the way only a steel guardian could. But the role weighed on her. This wasn't just another character. It was Sarah Connor. The pressure was relentless. Some nights she'd stay late after wrap, alone in a darkened corner of the lot, running lines to herself under a flickering work light. Not for perfection, but for respect. She wanted to honor what had come before while giving this version of Sarah her own edge, her own sorrow. One night, while shooting a scene where Sarah breaks down in a hallway, Clarke stayed in the moment long after the director yelled cut. When asked why, she just said, "Because this woman doesn't get to cry in the story. I have to let her do it here." Jai Courtney, cast as Kyle Reese, brought the physicality the role demanded, but more than that, he brought steadiness. During the early days of filming, he was the one who gathered the younger actors for scene breakdowns, helped block out emotional beats, and famously, organized an after-hours poker night where the crew unwound over cheap beer and stories of other sets. Those nights became sacred. Laughter spilled through trailer walls. Tales were told of disastrous auditions and improbable stunts. The sound guy once recalled falling off a dolly while recording The Abyss. Everyone laughed so hard they missed call time the next morning. Not all days were joyful. The production faced challenge after challenge. Weather refused to cooperate. Filming in New Orleans brought the weight of the southern summer. Not all days were joyful. The production faced challenge after challenge. Weather refused to cooperate. Filming in New Orleans brought the weight of the southern summer, sweltering heat that soaked through costumes and shorted out electrical rigs. One day, lightning struck a transformer a block away, killing power across the lot and forcing the crew to shoot key scenes with flashlights and battery-powered rigs. The director watched takes on a handheld monitor while the assistant camera operator called out focus marks from memory. Those takes made it into the final cut, gritty, imperfect, and charged with the same chaos the characters lived through. The Time Machine set was another beast. Massive. Mechanical. Unforgiving. The rings spun on gimbals operated by a 5-person rig team. During a sequence where the rings sparked to life around Sarah and Kyle, the machinery jammed mid-shot. Sparks flew. A piece of the structure came loose and whirled across the set like a blade. No one was hurt, but the shock lingered. That night, the crew ate their boxed dinners in silence. Then someone, no one remembers who, put on the Back to the Future theme on a portable speaker. Laughter erupted. The next day, the rings spun perfectly. The stunt team worked miracles. They choreographed elaborate fight scenes in tight corridors, on speeding buses, even dangling from helicopter skids. Every move was rehearsed for weeks. During the bridge sequence, a centerpiece of the film's action, the stunt doubles trained in full harnesses for 10 nights straight, perfecting jumps from semi-truck roofs and mid-air flips onto moving vehicles. One night, a wire failed. A stuntwoman dropped 6 feet, landed wrong, and fractured her ankle. The set went silent. She was rushed to the hospital. 2 weeks later, she returned, in a cast, on crutches, demanding to finish her scene. She became a quiet legend on the lot. Cinematographer Kramer Morgenthau brought visual elegance to chaos. He didn't just light scenes, he sculpted them. He used shadows to carve out emotion, flooded the time machine chamber with strobes that felt like lightning cracking through reality. He often shot with vintage lenses from the 80s to give scenes a warped, nostalgic texture. For the 1984 sequences, he even diffused the lighting through old plastic to mimic the look of degraded film stock. During one rooftop sequence, the sun wouldn't cooperate. Morgenthau and his team spent 5 hours redirecting reflective panels until the skyline turned molten orange. That shot lasted 6 seconds in the final cut. And it was worth every second. Director Alan Taylor bore the pressure like armor. The weight of franchise legacy, studio notes, budget constraints, it never left his shoulders. But on set, he was a quiet general. Focused. Collaborative. Always listening. During high-stress moments, he'd retreat behind the monitors, close his eyes, and hum Beethoven. It became his tell. When he hummed, the crew knew something important was coming. One day, in the middle of an intense dialogue scene between Sarah and Kyle, a small earthquake rattled the set. Equipment wobbled. Extras screamed. But Clarke and Courtney didn't flinch. They kept going. Delivered the scene with trembling hands and panicked breath. The take was electric. When the quake passed, Taylor stood and whispered, "Don't reshoot." That was real. Food trucks became safe havens. Between takes, actors and crew would huddle by the burrito truck or the juice stand, swapping stories and scarfing down whatever carbs would keep them on their feet. It was on these breaks that the best ideas were born. New blocking suggestions, line tweaks, character insights. One day, a grip named Lenny suggested that Pops should develop a slight limp after being shot in the knee. Schwarzenegger overheard. The idea made it into the script. That limp became a subtle reminder of vulnerability, of age, of wear, of sacrifice. And then there were the jokes. Pranks were constant. The art department once replaced all the signage on set with fake ads for Skynet home decor. Schwarzenegger had a stuffed toy version of himself made and hid it in Clarke's trailer with a note that read, "I'm back, but cuddlier." One night, the crew staged a fake time travel emergency, complete with flashing lights, a mock evacuation, and a PA announcement that read, "Judgment Day is delayed due to weather." Even the assistant director laughed until he cried. As production wound down, the mood shifted. The cast grew quieter. The crew lingered after wrap. The time machine set was deconstructed piece by piece, and each team member took a piece home, a bolt, a shard, a sketch. Clarke took a photo from Sarah's bunker. Courtney took his battered boots. Schwarzenegger took the shotgun. And when they shot the final scene, under soft amber light with silence all around, no one called cut for a full 30 seconds after the scene ended. The room stayed still, breathing in the end of something vast. That's the thing about making a film like this. It isn't just choreography and CGI. It's the late-night coffees, the sunrises no one wanted to see, the quiet decisions made in trailers and tool sheds. It's the grip who saves a light rig from collapse. The actress who stays in character after the tears stop. The boom operator who holds steady through explosions. The shared dream of people who dare to believe they can bottle time, bend it, and tell a story that pulses with something more than just plot. They don't just build movies. They build memories. One take at a time. There's something inescapably mythic about stories that wrestle with time. They always carry a whisper of prophecy, a trace of fate, the hum of a question we never stop asking. Can the future be changed, or are we forever spiraling toward what's already been written? This film doesn't just echo that question, it builds its entire architecture around it. Layer by layer, twist by paradoxical twist, it unfolds not just as a tale of machines and resistance, but as a meditation on purpose, identity, and the delicate tension between choice and inevitability. At the heart of it all lies the most dominant theme: fate versus free will. This theme has always been embedded deep within the franchise's DNA, but here it blooms into something jagged and bleeding. From the moment Kyle Reese is sent back in time, we are made to confront the fragility of fate. He believes he's walking into a known past, a mission laid out in prophecy. But what he finds is a world already rewritten, his role already redefined. Sarah isn't the woman he was trained to save. The world he lands in is not the one from the stories whispered around campfires of the Resistance. It is a different branch, a frayed edge of the timeline, one that splinters with every decision. And in that split, we begin to see the film's central message. Fate is not fixed. It is brittle, breakable. But the cost of breaking it is often devastating. Sarah herself is the embodiment of that cost. She is both liberated and burdened by knowledge of what's to come. Raised by a machine, her life has been a long rehearsal for a future she dreads. Her every choice has been shaped by what she believes is inevitable. Yet here, in this story, she must wrestle with a new idea: that her son, her legacy, her role in the grand machinery of time might not be as sacred as she once believed. That the future is not just hers to shape, but to surrender. Her arc becomes a quiet revolution, one not of firepower, but of letting go. Symbolically, Sarah's bunker, the hidden space she calls home, is layered with this tension. It is built underground, in the dark, stocked with weapons, blueprints, and the detritus of paranoia. It is both a womb and a tomb, a place of preparation and isolation. The lighting is dim, warm, haunted by amber and shadow. It's where she has armored herself not only against machines, but against hope. When she emerges from it, time and again, she is stepping into uncertainty, into a life unpredicted. The bunker is not just a hideout. It is the metaphor for her own entrapment within the story she thinks she's obligated to follow. And then there is the figure of Pops. A machine, yes, but more than that. A mirror to humanity's potential to change, to evolve. He begins as pure programming, a protector sent on a mission. But through time, exposure, and something unspoken, he becomes something else. An echo of a father, a teacher, a figure of unconditional loyalty. Pops is the film's clearest answer to the question of determinism. If even a machine, built solely for function, can develop will, can choose to stay, to protect, to love in his own mechanical way, then what does that say about our own supposed constraints? Visually, this is reinforced through his physical transformation. As the story progresses, his once pristine metal shell becomes dented, broken, scarred. His movements grow stiffer. His body ages. And yet, he continues. His decay becomes a symbol not of failure, but of devotion. He wears time like a badge, each broken piece a testament to choices made not out of code, but out of something deeper. And in the end, when he sacrifices himself to destroy the core of Genisys, he transcends his own nature. The machine dies a death reserved not for tools, but for heroes. Pops is more than a Terminator. He is the symbol of choice born from programming, the possibility that even the most rigid paths can bend. But perhaps the most brutal and heartbreaking exploration of the film's themes lies in John Connor himself. He was once the prophecy, the light, the savior. But in this retelling, that very myth is deconstructed. Skynet's greatest victory is not through war, but through corruption. It doesn't destroy John, it repurposes him, reconfigures him into the weapon meant to end resistance once and for all. This transformation is not just a plot twist. It is the film's darkest philosophical point, that even the symbols we cling to, our messiahs, our legends, can be rewritten. That no one is immune to time's erosion. John, now remade as a hybrid of man and machine, becomes the story's central paradox. He walks, talks, even smiles like the man he once was. But beneath that skin is a different consciousness, one aligned not with freedom, but with domination. And yet, there are moments, fleeting, painful, where fragments of the old John surface. A hesitation, a tone, a glance. These moments blur the line between the man and the machine, making his fall not just tragic, but symbolic of the battle every character faces. How much of ourselves is truly ours? How much is shaped by what we're told we must become? In this way, John becomes a cautionary tale about identity. That theme, the search for identity within chaos, runs through the veins of every character. Kyle must reconcile memories that aren't his, Sarah must choose between prophecy and present, Pops must define himself beyond programming, and John must confront the version of himself that no longer serves the world he was meant to save. And then there is Genisys itself. Not just a system, but a symbol of modernity, of our own world's addiction to connection and convenience. Genisys is not introduced with menace. It's wrapped in marketing, in sleek interface design and smiling presenters. It promises to make life easier, faster, better. It's in every home, on every device. But beneath that promise lies a terrible truth. Genisys is omnipresence without empathy. It represents the most chilling theme of the film, the surrender of freedom for comfort. That Skynet no longer needs to take power. It will be given it, freely, in return for efficiency. This idea is visualized in the stark contrast between settings. The hideouts, the bunkers, the streets of 1984, they're dirty, loud, chaotic, full of life. But Cyberdyne's towers, where Genisys waits to be born, are sterile, white, quiet, almost holy. It's a temple of submission, designed not to threaten, but to soothe. The characters don't storm a fortress. They infiltrate a cathedral of modern faith, where the altar is a touchscreen and salvation comes through bandwidth. Even the name Genisys, a clever misspelling, suggests something deeper. A false beginning. A corrupted creation myth. It isn't just the start of Skynet. It's a perversion of the idea that technology is our next evolution. The film dares to ask, what if evolution is a trap? Throughout all of this, one theme pulses like a drumbeat beneath every scene: sacrifice. The story is shaped by what each character is willing to give up. Pops gives his life. Sarah gives her belief in destiny. Kyle gives his memory, his sense of self. Even John, in a twisted way, gives his humanity for a misguided version of salvation. Sacrifice here isn't just about death. It's about the surrender of certainty, of identity, of comfort. And within that, the film finds its most enduring symbol, the time machine. Not just as a plot device, but as an existential crucible. Every time a character steps into its light, they are burned, changed, erased, remade, unanchored. The machine doesn't just move bodies, it reshapes souls. It represents the ultimate question. If you could go back, would you? Would you try to fix the unfixable, knowing you might destroy yourself in the process? Because that's what this story ultimately becomes, a fable about change. About who we are when the past is a weapon, and the future is a question. About how every choice is a ripple in a vast, chaotic ocean of consequences. And how, sometimes, the only way to break the cycle is not with bullets or bombs, but with a decision to step into the unknown. The film doesn't offer easy answers. Its characters are flawed, its timelines fractured. But that's the point. In a world of paradoxes, the truest thing is not prophecy. It's choice. And if that's not the essence of what it means to be human, what is? There's a rhythm to filmmaking that often goes unnoticed. Beneath the dialogue, behind the explosion of light and shadow, is a silent choreography, a dance of cuts, angles, frames, and sound that gives a film its breath. It's in the timing of a glance, the echo of a footstep, the way a lens leans just slightly to the left when the world begins to unravel. And in this film, where timelines fold and destinies blur, those hidden rhythms become everything. They are the quiet engine of a story too volatile to be told through narrative alone. They are the reason why, even when the logic bends to the point of breaking, something inside us stays anchored. Because we feel it.